Yeah, they were both like this before.
Is that 16?
I'm waiting for what series.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
So that was in and of itself a subdivision.
Okay, I want to welcome everybody to this regular meeting of the Ojai Planning Commission. Members of the public wishing to address the Planning Commission on items appearing on the agenda are requested to complete a speaker's card and file it with the secretary prior to the start of the meeting. Cards are available in the lobby. Speakers should state their name and address for the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Comments must be directed to the commission, not the audience. While Planning Commission is in session, all in attendance are expected to maintain order and decorum and to obey the orders of the chair. Roll call, please.
Chair Zabilla.
Here.
Vice Chair Jagiello. Here. Commissioners Quillisi.
Here.
Merck.
Here.
Nolan.
Here. Commissioner Nolan, can you lead us in the pledge, please?
Yes, please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If this is,
Okay, we are at public communications, which is the time set aside during the Planning Commission meeting for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on items of city business other than scheduled agenda items. Matters raised at this time may be briefly discussed by the Commission and will generally be referred to staff and/or placed on a subsequent agenda. Under state law, other than for emergency items, no action can be taken at this meeting. Would anybody like to say anything on an item other than the one that's agendized? Nope. Okay. Then we're going to move on to our consent items, the first being the minutes of the regular meeting of the Planning Commission, July 6, 2016.
I'll move we approve the minutes of July 6th.
second?
Roll call, please.
Quillisi.
Yes.
Merck.
Yes.
Jagiello. Zabilla.
Yes.
Nolan.
Yes.
Okay, then we're going to move on to the minutes of the regular meeting of the Planning Commission, July 20th, 2016.
I'll move we approve the minutes for July 20th.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Quillisi.
Yes.
Merck.
Yes.
Jagiello. Zabilla.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Now we'll move on to disclosure of site visits and ex parte contacts. Commissioner Quillisi.
I have visited the site, no ex parte contact.
I visited both sites this evening and did not have any ex parte contacts.
I visited both sites and had no ex parte contact.
I've also visited both sites and had no ex parte contacts.
And I too visited both sites and have had no ex parte contacts.
Okay, we're going to move on to our first public hearing item, which is the tentative parcel map TPM 15-01 to subdivide one parcel to create three at 712 Drown Avenue. Assessors parcel numbers 02200523030 and 110. The general plan land use designation of the property is medium density residential, MR, and the zoning classification of the property, single family residential, medium low density, RO. A categorical exemption for CEQA is not required for the denial of a project, should that be the case. Property owner Stephen Glenn, Representative Ben Turner, designer Robert William Company. I'd like to hear from staff.
Thank you. Sherry, did you put on the dais the letter from the applicant? Okay, so you have the letter. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sherry. Right. Yeah. Okay, so I just want to let you know that subsequent to the staff report being published, the applicant has formally requested a continuation of this item to allow him to redraw. And if you'd like me to get that letter for your consideration, we can have Sherry go get copies of it. But and just for your information, so that you know, because this is a parcel map and subject to both the city's regulations on subdivision and the State of California Subdivision Map Act, there are timeframes, for staff to take action and move things forward. And so by the applicant actually requesting for a continuance, that sort of stays the clock, so to speak, for the Subdivision Map Act rules and ours too. So an applicant can actually do that for themselves, even though the city is required to take action by a certain period of time. So I just want to let you know that is a new wrinkle in this item that's come since we published. Also, you would find before you a letter from a neighbor regarding the project. So with that, we have provided 2 different recommendations for this particular project. One, after taking testimony and the staff report and presentation, we have presented required findings for the denial of parcel map 5971, or you can choose to continue the project and direct the applicant to make design adjustments. So it appears that now at this point that's sort of moot since the applicant has offered to do that on his own. So if you'd like, I can go through the staff report, or we can, you can open the public hearing and take testimony, or we can just defer, whatever you'd like.
Unless my fellow commissioners would like to hear more, I think maybe we could let the public have a say and then come back to you with
That's
questions.
fine.
Is that everybody okay with that?
I'm fine with
Okay.
whatever you're choosing.
Okay, so we have a number of speakers cards. The first one, I'm going to open the public hearing, and the first speaker card is John Morrell, and we are also in receipt of a letter from you as well. Okay.
John Morrell, 804 Grand Avenue. I'm speaking for myself and my wife, Jacqueline Winspear. And I don't know what weight this carries, but I spoke to Kathy Hoff, who owns one of the houses that are concerned as I am, and she's on vacation in Arizona, and said it would be okay with her if I spoke for her at this meeting. First thing I want to do is make sure everybody understands, in a nutshell, what's happened on this property, 708 and 712. It used to be one house and a long lot, one house and a long lot. In 2011, it was redrawn to one tiny lot and one gigantic lot. Surprised people want to put houses on it. The great part of the story is that this part was done without notifying the neighbors. Without notifying the neighbors, the people most concerned that this would be done and that houses would be built. I came in and I asked Sherry, how could that have happened? And she said, I'm sorry?
Can you go to the mic?
I'm sorry, and she said it must have been an oversight. So I wrote the letter to Rob Mullane that's in front of you to make sure I was on record as having said, hey, we didn't get notified, and if there was notification, let's see it, okay? So let me get up to the present then. I understand I only have 3 minutes. The first point I want to make is, have you looked at Lake Casitas lately? Okay, you want to put water users back there who are going to use the water that we're trying to conserve. Second is, you're going to ruin my beautiful view, Kathy Hoff's view, Laura's view, who's sitting here. Our views have dollar value. Are you going to be there to compensate me when I sell my house for less money because it has a crummy view instead of a beautiful view? And the last point I want to make is from the code. And I also distributed copies of this page from the code. It's from the lot line adjustments page. Did you get that along with the letter?
Yes, we have that.
Okay, I just want to read one sentence from it. The lot line adjustment shall not result in a greater number of residential developable parcels that existed prior to the adjustment. Everybody understands that. Between 2011, what was done in 2011, and what's being proposed now is a violation of the code. You can't do it. It says right here in black and white, you can't do it. So the only other thing I have to say is I don't want to get involved in a lawsuit over this.
Laura Woods?
I'm Laura Woods, and my address is 802 Grand. My backyard is contiguous with the property you're talking about. And because I bought the house, carefully bought the house, I have another house in Ventura, but that is my retirement house. So I was very careful. You have a very busy street, but I didn't really care. I have one little house. It's as you know, Grand has a lot of little 50s houses on it that is less than 9 feet away from me. But I had this magnificent view of the mountains. So to preserve that view, I was in escrow twice to buy that property. The first time, I know the property well because of that. I've walked it, I've looked in the well, I know the groundwater level. Also, I have an open culvert that goes through my property that drains that area and upper drown above it as well. Both escrows ended sadly
nothing to do with me. The first one, I went down to Ventura and found out the parcel number I was given was wrong. And on the second escrow, when I went up to Santa Barbara to sign the final papers, another lien was found on the house. So that one failed as well. But the reason I'm telling you this story is that I feel I have established a value for my view. I was willing to pay between $600,000 and $650,000 for that property that went contiguous with my house. And I was not going to build on it. It would have been for agriculture, which that rich land it should be for agriculture. But anyway, getting back to the value of the land, my attorney tells me that we buy below and we buy up. But if a value has been assessed for a view, then it is actionable. So I want to let you know that a value was assessed for that view. And it wasn't just my value. I mean, I was willing to pay over $600,000, but there's these people who have homes along that stretch too, and I'm sure it's worth that to them as well. It's a magnificent view, and the only reason for buying in that area, to my way of thinking. Okay, so the next point I wanted to make was also water. As you know, I mentioned that I have an open culvert that goes directly to the ocean from there, and I used to have a fence that goes in the back, and every time I was on the property, I used to have a fence that went back there because I had to clear debris out of the way, and Dan cleared debris, and John cleared debris because none of us wanted our homes flooded. It has a great tendency to flood there, and so we were all kind of on the watch for that. I did keep track of where the groundwater was, because the groundwater there was very high. Tony, the previous owner, I guess, although he still seems involved, had an open well, I guess an abandoned well. He had a pump, and he did pump water out of it. But you could look down in there and see your groundwater below you, and it's a lovely piece of land from soil and water standpoint. Okay.
Can you
so I've
conclude your
spoken-
comments, please? Your time is up.
Oh, okay. All right. Can I leave the points I want maintained with someone so that if this comes up again? Okay, great, thanks.
Would you like to leave them with Sherry?
I will.
Okay. I'm sorry, Madi?
Hi, my name is Moti Danino. I live in 708. This is the smaller parcel. I bought the house in 2011, and like everybody here, the view is amazing. This is one of the reason, or the main reason I bought this house. And one of my first questions to Kathy Hoff, which was my realtor, is the tenant or the owner can build over there? And if he can, what can he do? And, I was told that there was, Tony tried to do it before and he was denied, and nothing can be built over there. And that's something that was decided on. So, I want to make sure that you know that this view is very important for me as well. I don't know what the impact on the environment, like probably these people know more than me. But that's very important for me to keep it. And one more thing that I want to note is that I didn't receive a notice for this hearing. The only reason I'm here is that I came to complain about the owner for another issue. They put a mobile home just outside my fence, in front of my nose kind of thing. And although they have 1.5 acres just outside, and I went to them and asked, hey, can you move it? I called the owner and said, hey, look how does it look? It's really horrible. And they moved it and then moved it back again. So I came to complain about it, and this is the only reason I know about the hearing. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. So, thank you.
Thank you. Dan? I'm not going to attempt your last name, Dan, but
Dan
please share it with
Lukashevich.
us. Okay, thank you.
I'm at 806 Grand Avenue, and I have a corner that abuts this property. And right in that corner is a large oak tree, has about a 60 or 80-foot span, and the site map shows one of the houses built right under the drip line of the oak tree. That's one thing. The other thing I noticed on the plan is they've drawn a culvert, this drainage problem. They've redirected the culvert around where they would have to dig through the roots of the oak tree to get to the drain. Now, the drain is a very serious thing. It starts somewhere up at the top of Drown, and when it rains heavily, we get a lot of water through there. It's not just the water that's on the property. The drain keeps my house from flooding, because I'm the lowest parcel on Grand Avenue, and so I'm the one that takes care of gets over there and cleans it out. The developer has put a fence across the drain. You guys should have seen that if you went to see the site at all. He's covered up the pipe. The pipe is about 10 inches under the ground, and the house that's in the corner, the footing would just cut the pipe completely off. So this is a really serious issue as far as that property is concerned. Besides just building more houses, in the area, of course, that would take away from the price of the houses and the value. But the drainage it's a lot of water. It's thousands of gallons of water that come down through there when it rains hard. And the water table is basically, in the rainy seasons, it's right at ground level, because it comes up in my garage. Since I'm the lowest parcel, I do have a water problem in the garage just without the drain being there. So it's, that one house in the corner is just not acceptable, and the drain going right down through the oak tree is not acceptable. The oak tree's over my garage. If something happens to it, it's going to fall down in my garage and wreck that. So you're looking at a lot of, besides 802, 804, they both get flooded if that drain plugs up. And so it's a serious problem.
Thank you. The next item? Okay. Councilmember Clapp, did you want to speak on this item? Yes, I do. Okay.
I'm speaking as an individual, not as a member of City Council. Also, good evening, everyone. Chair Isabella and
Good evening.
Hard-working planning commissioners. I know how hard it is. I normally don't speak on items because I normally think it's inappropriate, but in this situation, I feel it's very appropriate, because I see three things happening in this community, and they're of great concern to me, and so therefore I'm coming forward to speak about them. One is a matter of water. I understand that everybody's hoping it's going to rain sometime, and it may, or it may not. But I think at this point in time, I really think it would be a very good idea to have a building moratorium, any new building, until we know that our water supply is safe. The second is, I've seen this happen in this town before, where a investor comes in and buys up a couple of lots, and they go and they get a lot line adjustment, and they've done exactly what was done here, which I'm going to hold up again, because this is a very classic trick that is done by real estate investors. They'll buy two parcels next to one another. They'll go in and request a lot line adjustment. They completely surround minimally the size of one piece of property so they can get a larger piece of property. Then they wait a while and they come back and they ask for another lot line adjustment so they can develop the property. This is a classic trick. It was done on Signal. It was done here right across from City Hall, and I see it's being done here again. This, to me, do you guys see what's been done here? I want these people to see what's been done here. This is a very classic trick. Yeah. I find it offensive and insulting, and I also feel that this is what I call death by 1,000 cuts. This is what's happening to our community. It's called whittling away at the edges until it ultimately destroys our community. So I really strongly urge you to deny this request. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember Clapp. Mr. Turner, I'd like to hear from the applicant now. I thought it might be better to have you, if you'd like, respond to some of this, or...
Certainly, I'll do my best. My name is Ben Turner. I'm here representing the applicant. Thank you for hearing me. I was actually coming here to speak to you about some code issues, but obviously before the hearing and during these comments, I've heard a lot of other things, some of which I haven't any knowledge of, but I'm going to make myself available right after the conclusion of this outside here to answer any more questions and have a chat with the neighbors. And if things need to be changed on the project, then we're going to change them. We have to redesign the project anyway, and that's what I was coming primarily to speak about. But I wanted to answer a few things, to clarify a few things too. One is this isn't a lot line adjustment, it's a subdivision. So when you're looking at the ordinances, there might be different pages to look at that might give clarity to some people's concerns. The second one is, I only speaking as an applicant, but I would have to be careful what I say, but to insinuate that trickery has taken place or that something untoward has happened, I'd like to see some better explanations and some proof of that. I'm only aware of what we have done, and we have to follow code. We have to follow subdivision ordinances by California. If anything has been done that is untoward or sneaky, I'm certainly here to answer, but it has to be presented in a careful and concise way so that I can understand what's being said, and where it breaks code and law, if it does. So after saying that, also the development plans that you've seen, so this is something that I know the commissioners might know this, but the public, is that a tentative map is analyzed to say, can this property be subdivided legally? So when I go to other jurisdictions, for example in Ventura, and I go and speak about a subdivision, they will want to see, can you build a residence to the minimum standards here with all the improvements that are necessary by law? That is how we are going to analyze whether this subdivision is legal to occur in the first place. They want to see, is it practical, is it possible? But the tentative map is not a development plan. The applicant, Stephen Glenn, has not asked me to draw any floor plans. There's no elevations of these buildings. There's no sections. If you ask me how high they are, I have no idea. The scope of work was just to put footprints on the ground in order to analyze stormwater, surface water, drainage, grades, and access for a subdivision. That doesn't lock him in to pursuing that development in that way with those buildings in that position. As long as we conform to all the setbacks, we come in again with development plans that could look very different. It could be in 1 year or 10 years. There's no time limit. Basically, what goes to be recorded after the commission approves a project is a parcel map, which is essentially a very, very stripped out. It just has parcel lines on it and easements and meets and bounds. That's it. The county doesn't record anything else. In fact, I brought one with me because that was part of my second point. The reason we're here, now obviously, if the project changes in results of comments that we've heard from the public, that's one thing, but the reason we continued, or asked for continuation, is because we couldn't meet with staff's approval for this project, and that comes down to code. So I wanted to explain to you why we're here after such a long period of time without really a project to put in front of you, is because the Ojai's code for subdivisions isn't regularly used. I don't think it's been, there hasn't been a lot of subdivisions in the past 10 years here. I looked through for examples of subdivisions that were created where parcels were accessed by easements, and because there's not many, I was only able to find one recent one. That was from 2009. That's the map I have before me. The Ojai's codes state that to access a parcel that's being created, you need access on a public right-of-way, a public street, or a private street. And unfortunately, private street is not defined. So we would come forward with the application showing that an easement was going to serve the two rear parcels. And that is an actual very usual way to create a subdivision. That's what easements are for. Easements are typically, and staff can interject if I'm technically wrong, but easements are created to either create streets, like you might have a 25-foot wide street blacktop, but your easement is 60 feet wide, or it's to provide infrastructure for utility companies to cross private land to serve a whole subdivision or other people's homes, or it's for a private individual to say, I own this land, but I'm letting this person cross it, usually with access and utilities. So I happen to live actually on a parcel myself. I'm 200 foot from the public right-of-way. My only access to my parcel is by an easement across my neighbor's land. That has been deemed not to be compliant with code in Ojai. And that's the only area around here that I've ever heard that. And I personally feel that that's because there's a lack of definition in the code. And so currently, the only way for us to proceed is to move all the buildings and adjust things to create a public street level roadway going into the parcels to serve the rear two parcels. And that ends up being a 33-foot wide road, which I'm sure you'd agree sounds a little bit extreme to serve two parcels that are a little over a quarter of an acre. So I'm just bringing this to your attention. I don't believe that the Planning Commission is going to act and the City Council is going to move and everything's going to change the code to suit my application. I'm bringing it to your attention because I come before you with a lot of projects, and I feel that there are sections of the Ojai's ordinances, and this is typical in small cities. They tend to copy-paste from larger cities and counties because they can't pay somebody a good amount of money to sit down and write swaths of code. So the subdivision ordinances look like they need to really be reviewed by somebody to make sure they're consistent with the state's laws and normal development. Because if you can't develop by serving a parcel with an easement, then you've really restricted what you can do. And I know there's not a lot of development in Ojai because we don't have a lot of greenfield lots, but if your code allows lots of a certain size to be in a certain zone, and an applicant comes forward and meets those codes, that's what gets approved, and that's how we're analyzed. Speaking very briefly, just to switch gears back to a point that we'd heard about, everyone was concerned about water and stormwater and what happens with this culvert. This culvert isn't, there's a pipe entry in the ground, and it's partly collapsed, and it just looks like a dugout with a pipe sticking out of it. We are not permitted to impose more water on anybody where the water leaves the property by SEQA. So we have to deal with that. So one of the things I was pointing out was, yes, there is a water inlet in the middle of the dirt, and it doesn't look like it's a good shape, but it's there, and it does eventually make its way to the culvert that runs through the neighbor's property. That water, we have to take it where it comes onto the property and get it back to the same place without imposing any more water on it. So we did a design that included soakaways and a bioswale that ran down the edge of the property that one of the other neighbors has said, there's an oak right over there, you're not going to be able to let that water run over that corner. So I'm going to look at that. But in terms of the general concerns about where does the water go, they're going to block off and build a house over this drain and it won't, my property's going to flood. There's a big stack of hydraulic calculations in the file that essentially we have to show that we can prove that the water that's landing on these new buildings or coming onto the property, we're dealing with it. It's not being exiting at an unsafe speed. It's not exiting with picking up accumulated oil from a car park or roofs. We have to deal with that water, and the requirements for dealing with that water are far higher than they have ever been in the past. So, I understand there are concerns, and I'm going to speak to people, but I just want to bring all these points to your attention, particularly for you, the definition sections of the subdivision, to see whether in the future we don't have to, that we can develop normally in Ojai on the seldom locations that we can perform subdivisions here. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Turner? No? Okay. Does anybody else want to speak on this item? No? Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing and ask Director Wald a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So, can you, well, I'll just say since the applicants requested a continuance, I'm sort of, it sounds like there's a lot of information that has to be now absorbed by everyone in the room and figure out which way to go forward. So that said, I'm sort of inclined to favor continuing the item and seeing, for everyone to get more information, more investigation. And that said, on this one point, which seems to be the biggest point, can you share your view on the issue of not being able to use an easement to access these parcels?
Well, we're not saying he can't use an easement. We're saying that the parcel has to be accessed by a private street or a public street. I mean, of course, as he said, if you have a private street, you have an easement, because everyone has a right to egress and ingress on it. Many communities, lots and lots of neighborhoods are developed over private streets. Almost every community that's gated is private street network. So it looks and functions like a regular street. You have the opportunity, if you have sufficient land, to create flag lots. And flag lots have a large portion of the land and a strip that's in fee title that goes out to a public street. We see those in Ojai, too. In this particular case, the land isn't wide enough for him to do a flag lot. So we can provide for you the types of lots. We had that exhibit ready to go, and then we sort of, it gets really complex when you get into this, but there's corner lots and interior lots and key lots and flag lots and et cetera, et cetera. So, they all have definitions, they all have certain requirements, and in this particular case, Ojai's subdivision ordinance is rather brief. It's not very detailed, but it does specifically say, that you have to provide access through either a public or private street. Now, City of Ojai doesn't have, I don't believe, good city standards. Most cities have standard specifications that would talk about what a private street would be. And then there would be exceptions that the Public Works Director could do if you wanted to narrow that street for some reason. Now, in this case, I think 25 feet is what the fire department wants for access. But we get into, there has to be a turnaround because, again, the street is going to be accessed by, the general people who come and visit any house, the mail, the garbage people, your paper boy, your guests, and so, there has to be a turnaround on that for egress and ingress, and that includes, emergency vehicles. So anytime you're cutting and subdividing land, you have to provide for all that. So, that's just typical good engineering practice as the City of Ojai's code would references. So really it just gets down to, dividing in a way, subdividing and providing sufficient access. It isn't about, subdividing or creating landlocked parcels that then have these driveway easements that go as if you're, you typically would see those in rural places, where there aren't, urban standards. You might see a gravel road going back to a house or something like that. It's not common in urban divisions. But I will also say that this has all been vetted through the city attorney. He's looked at everything. He agrees with the resolution. It's got his stamp of approval on it. So this isn't just something that the planning department or the community development department looked at without running it through. You have to be very careful when you take something for denial, just as careful or if not more than when you approve something. So, we're very careful and been working with the applicant. I think that's one of the reasons he wants to redesign. I will also offer for your other consideration that a lot line adjustment is very, very clear in the State of California's Subdivision Map Act what cities can and cannot do. And cities are very limited in what they can do with a lot line adjustment. So when that came through in 2012 and somebody meets the minimum standards of frontage, width, length, square footage, the city is pretty much obligated under state law to approve that, as long as the resultant parcel meets all the minimums. It's very much different than a parcel map. Parcel map, you can condition, you can approve, you can deny. A lot line adjustment, it's very restricted. We can only put conditions on it as to make it conform to minimums. So they're very different. And if a person comes in and the code says they can cut this parcel out, they can adjust it and end up with this really small parcel, and that parcel meets the minimums, we're pretty much stuck agreeing to it, and probably that's what happened in this case. So they're two completely different processes. It's like the applicant said, parcel map's very much different, and you have a lot more leeway and a lot more, discretion on how you approve it than you do a lot line adjustment. Just to say, they are completely different.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Quillisi?
Thank you, Chair Zabilla. Something I learned this week, and I wanted to address the audience as well, is that assessor parcel numbers are not the same as parcels. That sounds a little strange, I know, but my understanding of the transaction that took place in 2011 or 2012 is that parcels 030 and 040 were changed by a lot line adjustment to parcels 030 and 012, or 120, excuse me, and 030 and 110 are now a single parcel. Is that correct, first of all?
That's my understanding, so.
And again, I'm saying this because this is something I just learned myself. The assessor parcel numbers are not, by their description, the same as parcels for developmental purposes. And what it looks like to me here is that 4 or 5 years ago, we had 2 parcels with 2 homes, and now we have 2 parcels with 2 homes. And to my reading of the code, that has not violated the code. A request to subdivide a parcel is a separate part of the code,
Correct.
and it is subject to a separate request and approval or denial. Now, as far as notification, I think that the lot line adjustment, at least by my reading of the code, was not done illegally. Sneaky or not, I don't care to address. But I think the lot line adjustment was done legally because it did not result in a larger number of parcels. As far as the notification of the neighbors 4 or 5 years ago, I wasn't here, John was, and whether they were notified or not, I couldn't speak to.
Staff did look at the file, and there was the list in there, the 300-foot list. The properties, you have it right there, Sherry has it right there. Of course, I wasn't here, I can't tell you if those
No
letters.
proof one way or another whether the
There's-
neighbors were notified.
There's a list there, and there's,
Yeah.
but, we don't, I don't think any city does. No city puts their notifications in certified mail. Government agencies, believe it or not, actually believe that the post office does their job, and by putting it into the post office, which is another government agency, that is adequate service. So all we could do is make sure that it was on the list. We don't know, maybe Sherry might, because she might have been here, but I wouldn't know, but we do know that it was on the list, so it looks like there was a 300-foot boundary.
Okay.
Anything else?
That's all I have, thank you.
Commissioner Merck? Anything?
I look like I want to say something?
Well, we're
I
discussing now.
don't know that we ever saw this at the Planning Commission. I certainly don't recall it. I think it
Oh,
may
you
have
know
been
what?
done as
I thought I did go to Planning Commission. It's required to go to Planning Commission if the adjustment of a lot line adjustment is greater than 10%. If you're just, correct, Sherry? I understand the parameters. So if you're just doing a minor adjustment because maybe your water heater, your water closet is close and you got to do it, that's one thing. But to do something of this scope, or something was really big and really got really small, that required Planning Commission approval. Do you know if it went? Okay.
I just want to say historically, we've strongly discouraged subdivisions in Ojai, primarily due to traffic concerns. So I'm not inclined to approve this anyway. And I'm kind of wondering if it's worth proceeding at all, or if we do have findings for denial for tonight. So I'm kind of inclined to go that way myself.
A lot of good thoughts were exchanged here tonight. I like to see the applicant have a continuation, another opportunity to submit a plan within the boundaries of our existing codes and laws. I think he's got a lot of hurdles to go over anyway with that. If he's determined to do that, I see no reason why not to allow him the opportunity, and we'll take a look at it when it comes around the second time, because there's a lot of big obstacles that you have to overcome, and I'm not sure you'll be able to do that, but certainly I would like to give you the opportunity within the boundaries of our existing codes and laws.
I'm in agreement, too, to allow the applicant to continue, and then when we have more information, I feel that I could better make a decision. I also want to just make a comment. I know we were only given this 11, or 8.5 by 11 drawing, which I'm having a little hard time reading with even with my glasses. But the site plan was so small in here that I see there's a couple contours. I'm just not sure that all the existing site information is there. Looks like you wanted to address it.
Now open the public hearing
Yeah.
for the applicant to answer that question.
Initially, we had 12 pages in the subdivision application that detailed, here's an existing site, here is going to be the original survey here, and we pasted out. The city engineer told us that really tentative maps need to be condensed, and they should normally be down to 1 or 2 pages. I'm happy to bring in, larger plans that are clearer, that have more information on them for you to make your decision. I just want to make sure that, that staff, when they get the version that we have to submit for our formal, for you to rule on, it has to be a much more condensed version, because that seems to be the process. I didn't really know that when I started working on plans with the engineers, and that's why we produced a very thick set that had lots more detail on there, but that's not the way that it's processed, unfortunately.
Yeah,
So-
I was just going to say, the actual site plan is a portion
Yeah, it's a small part,
of
because
the
we
eight,
had, yeah.
of this, even if it was an 8.5 by 11 site plan.
Absolutely, 11 by
I would be
17,
able
yeah.
to,
There are huge ones in Jay's office. I saw one this afternoon.
Right.
It's 4
But-
feet by 3
right.
feet.
Sure, sir.
yeah,
It's not the correct one, but it's what's there.
yeah. So for instance, just the existing site information, like the oak tree that was discussed, and a little more information on the drainage flows and what have you would
Okay.
be beneficial.
Wanted to add a few more comments, if I may, because of things that have occurred since. Just to help out with people's understanding, because I do have to explain this to clients a lot. The assessor's parcel numbers are actually tax areas. So you can have a parcel with multiple tax areas, like a farmer could have different parts of his property to being evaluated differently by the assessor because of different values of what's going on there. And you can actually have a situation where it's much, much rarer, where you have 2 parcels covered by 1 tax area. In our case, we discovered that property line existed, and that changed the project entirely and gave a lot more value to the land. So when you look at tax assessors lines, those are purely for tax assessment reasons. So that's just to clarify.
So do you have 3 parcels there then? Oh, you have 2.
I think we have 2 assessor numbers, yeah.
So you have, I think that was the question, is whether the small house that's been portioned off, the one that was lot line adjustment, smaller. If you counted that one, there's 3 then.
It's three
don't-
APMs.
Yeah, I actually wasn't working on that.
Okay,
so,
sorry.
clueless.
Sorry to put you on the
Sorry.
spot.
There's a couple of things I was going to bring up. The notifications, just so everybody is aware of the process. The applicant gives the labels to the city. And we have a choice where we go, but of course, we have to make sure that we get it right. So what we do at RWC is we go to the county GIS department, and they print out a list of labels. And we actually do tenant and owner, so that everybody gets noticed. If anybody didn't get noticed I just heard that 708, he mentioned to me that he didn't get noticed. Whatever I can do to resolve that with him, I'll do. But, I don't know how that process fell down, because it should be watertight.
So I might add, so, there is a limit, 300-foot radius from the subject property. So if somebody is outside that radius, what they need to do is make sure they call Sherry and that they get their name added to the list, so when it's notified the next time, anybody can request something, right? We can add them on. But the 300-foot list is finite. I mean, when they do that, it's a mathematical deal. So he's given us 300 feet. If someone happens to be outside that radius, they can still be included for noticing. They just have to let us know, because we wouldn't pick it up.
A couple of
Just hearing from Jason
minor
Lotto.
points. One is ATE did the traffic or trip analysis and that report should be in the staff file, at least, if not in front of the commission. So there was an analysis done to CEQA on the trips generation. And finally, just going back to the issues that, not regarding this project entirely, but just on the easement, the fire department access standards from Ventura County for serving this number of single-family dwellings is only to have a 15-foot wide road. The planning staff told us that because they view this not as a driveway, but it's accessing multiple parcels, that they wanted it to be a two-way street, which is what pushed it up to 25. My issue is with the with the private street definition in code not being there. We are being pushed towards designing a road to public standards, which in Ojai also are very poorly defined. So we're ending up at 25 feet plus 8 feet for on-street parking. That's not what I think about when I think about a driveway serving two homes. So I really do think that there still is an issue with the definitions in the code, and actually also with the standards that govern street design in Ojai. If you are going to push people towards having a street serving their single-family dwelling in certain situations, then I'd like to see that street defined, because the worst thing for me as a designer is for a client to come in and me to say to them, I don't know what I was going to do. I don't know what the rules are there. I love, I describe myself as a code monkey. I love looking at code. It's black and white. You point to it, you know where you stand. That's all any applicant asks for is definition. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing again, and
Well, can I just say one thing?
Sure.
Please? Thank you. So the reason that your site plan in here is really small is really, staff is trying to work with the applicant to come up with a design that we can support. Obviously, somebody said approve, we don't approve, we just write a letter, we write a staff report in support or not in support. We think it's really important to get the actual basics of the design down, and what happens is, if we're constantly going through this, like as he was saying, numerous sheets, 24 by 36, it's very expensive, and the fundamental design isn't right, it's an impediment to the applicant to just keep on pushing out these really large roll of plans. So as the other gentleman said in the audience, we have a set that's large. It doesn't have this configuration it has yet a different configuration of access. So when we get something that staff, or if we get something that staff can support, you'll for sure get full-size plans. But again, we are always aware of the cost to the applicant, and that's why this is small right now, is because we still knew with this design we weren't able to support it.
thank you, Director Wold. Okay, well, I'm going to say one last thing, and then if anybody else wants to speak. I think that there are formidable obstacles facing this applicant to move forward, and I think that he, I personally am not really in favor of a whole lot of any kind of real latitude on what's written in the code. Obviously, defining it further is always going to be a valuable exercise, but whether or not that happens anytime soon is hard to say. I think that the neighbors' concerns are absolutely been heard, and I certainly would feel exactly the same way as you do if I lived where you lived and had value in those views. I understand that. I hope that, obviously, from a design perspective, that would also be taken into account. Otherwise, I think that giving the applicant another shot to get it right, and in a way that makes sense for the neighborhood, if at all. Yes, water, I appreciate that, Commissioner Clapp. I mean, that is an ongoing concern of what, if we should build anything anymore, and that continues to be an open question in my mind. Commissioner Quillisi, is there anything else you want to say?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a question of staff. I presume it's going to take a motion to continue this case. And I'm wondering, did the applicant's request for a continuation be for a continuation to a date certain or a date uncertain? Uncertain, okay. Thank you. Then I'd like to make a motion that we continue this item to a date uncertain, pending the applicant coming back with more information for our consideration.
I will second the motion.
Roll call?
Quillisi?
Yes.
Merck?
Yes.
Jagiello?
Yes.
Sabilla?
Yes.
Nolan?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, everyone.
This is not
If you guys could take that conversation outside. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 4, which is a review of the city's proposed acquisition of real property at 205 Grand Avenue and its compliance with the City of Ojai's general plan. I'd like to hear from staff.
Thank you. So before you tonight is kind of a different item than I've brought in before you before, which is to consider and report on possible property acquisitions conformance with the general plan at 205 Grand Avenue. We're asking you that you hold a hearing and take public testimony if applicable, if everybody's out in the audience, and then forward a recommendation to City Council stating that the acquisition of 205 Grand Avenue is consistent with the general plan as it would provide additional opportunities for circulation, open space, recreational, and other public improvements, and would preserve and improve Ojai's small-town residential character. And as you know, we recently had a project come before you at 207 Grand, so you should be fairly familiar with this area. And as staff has provided the general plan designation and then a little vicinity oversight view of the area, and just some basic stats for the parcel. But what's really more important is just the regulations, and we put in there, this is one of the duties and powers that the Planning Commission is tasked with by the City Council, and that is to act in an advisory capacity in all matters pertaining to the development and modifications of streets, parks, public or private structures and buildings, housing, schools, grounds, vacant lots, and all other matters pertaining to the general and redevelopment plans of the city, including redevelopment projects and activities, and to recommend to the council or the redevelopment agency as appropriate plans for future growth, development, beautification of the city, and or the redevelopment of a project area. And it just goes on with, basically boiling it down to, they're asking you as an advisory body to advise them on the general plan consistency of this proposal. They have to purchase this property. And the staff has provided for you in the discussion some of the policies in the general plan. And really, we look generally at the circulation, open space, and land use policies. And given the fact that staff was provided with kind of an overall general idea of what might be done with this property, we found the nearest policies we could find that were really consistent with, and it's that preserve the following physical components of Ojai small-town character, along with desirable features of individual neighborhoods, incorporate them into a design of new development whenever feasible. And I think what's really important is, I think that's down here, retention of a feeling of openness and preserve the views. I mean, obviously, having this for something other than development and structure placement there will allow that sort of transitional street intersection to remain open and a view of the hills. It also is, let's see, so an emphasis on the ease of pedestrian and bicycle access and transportation, which is the last one under that land use policy, which my understanding is that the Complete Streets continues to look at this intersection. They have probably the entire time I've been here, the last couple of years and looking to make improvements, whether it be equestrian or bikes or pedestrian and what goes on Grand. So this will give a lot of open opportunities for them to do something. And then the next policy, LU 3.4, improve traffic flow and eliminate traffic congestion. Expansion of roadway capacity, where such expansion is compatible with environmental values. Again, you know, we're not talking about expanding this to increase volumes or have traffic move faster or more traffic move through the neighborhood. We're talking about for other purposes, and maybe Commissioner Nolan can talk a little bit more about that. But it's basically to improve the intersection and and make it more multimodal, you know, different, everyone, right, Kathleen? So then finally, we have circulation element, policy 1, provide for efficient movement of vehicles by designing, constructing, and maintaining a roadway circulation network which will function at an acceptable level of service. Well, we know that's not really important at this point. We know that generally the state of California has moved away from level of services. Obviously, our general plan is very dated when it comes to that. You know, again, provide for safety of pedestrians and bicyclists and to avoid gaps in the city's trail system. I mean, this is just a pivotal point right here. So we think that all these, while general, these policies, and that's what policies are supposed to be within the general plan general, that this is consistent with it, and that we ask that that you make the findings as recommended by staff in the staff report and move this on to City Council. And I'm open to any questions if you have anything. I mean, I know this is a little bit different than what we've done before, so I figure you might have some questions.
As far as the map goes, did you ever find out the lots that the city owns adjacent to 205?
Oh, yes, sir, I'm sorry, yes. So we own 203 and 201. My understanding is, if you turn to the next page, Signal Street, shown on the assessor's map, shows this really narrow street, but the pavement is actually wider than the street is, and it actually goes over 201. And that's why it's a little bit confusing to everyone, because the actual map doesn't look like what's on the street, what's actually on the ground.
Right. Yeah, there's that big turn in Signal, the Signal to Grand that goes through it. Now, I just heard that 203 was sold recently to someone else. That's why I'm confused. That had a for sale sign it forever, and Randy Haney, council member, was under he's not here tonight, but he was under the impression that was
I don't know.
not owned by the city.
That was my
Which makes a big difference in how we assess it.
That was my understanding too. I don't know. I'm not involved in real estate acquisition.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was spacing out, but I probably can clarify. Would you mind repeating the question?
Well, I really want, there was some conversation that I heard that 203 was not owned by the city, that they owned 201 only, and had, put an offer in at 203.
Want to see the map, Betsy?
Yes.
Yes.
May I come up there?
Yes, sure.
Okay.
There you go. So he's saying,
I was confused about this map as well. I spoke with Steve McCleary about it today, and apparently 201, yeah, that's the one, is cut off is cut up in the upper left-hand corner. The road swoops around and it takes a bite out of 201. And this is where the confusion lies for me as well, because we own 201, and then there were the other two lots, which I thought were 203 and 205, that were up for sale. My understanding was 205 was purchased, and that 203 was the one we were trying to purchase. So that's where I'm confused.
Okay,
well,
that's
that might make sense. My understanding was that we owned, the emails that I got was that we were trying to.
Let me have that picture too,
sure,
because
sure.
this confused me as well.
Yeah, I had that same question when
Yeah.
we had our planning meeting yesterday.
Yeah, this is really confusing.
Somebody might have the address wrong, but the emails I got was 205.
Right. The city also owns the property on the west side. There's a narrow sliver on
Yeah.
the opposite side of Signal. So
Right.
just to point that out.
So if you look at this here, there's 3 lots here, is my understanding. This one, and the one that appears to be scraped, I believe is the one that was purchased.
Right.
These two went into bankruptcy. We tried to buy both of them, but we were too late to the party. typical government, a little slow to act. And so these two were purchased, but the gentleman that purchased them sold this one, and that's the one that Kathleen's speaking about where they're coming in with a proposal, correct? But he came back to us, and after he declined our first offer, and came back and accepted the second offer to purchase this. So if this is what we would own, that would become green space.
So that's, on this map, it's 201, 203.
Yeah, and that's why I called Steve today. I was totally perplexed, and I think that 205, I don't know why it's highlighted. I think that's the one that was purchased that they're planning to develop.
Yeah.
No, 207 is
That
when the
makes-
house is going on.
That makes more sense.
Yeah, see,
207 was a case within the last month
Yeah.
or two.
Right.
yeah, and see, that's where it's really puzzling.
Garage or something.
That might be, does it already have a building on it?
No,
Yes.
No.
207 does.
no, it doesn't.
No?
Well, then things are really muddled. This is very muddled.
So is this 209?
That's 209.
So there are actually 4 lots in this little space.
Correct.
Okay, looks like 2 of them are scraped, 1 has trees on it, 1 has more or less nothing on it.
Well, I think I'm not trying to belabor this at all, because this is going to get really confusing, but the aerial that she showed, okay.
Yeah, let's,
So my understanding of this is the way it was explained to me, was that, and that one over here,
Yeah.
is that these don't match. That road is way wider than it's shown on paper. So this road is going over 201. It has, as he drew it, okay? Then this
told me.
is the 207, then where the gentleman, you just approved a house going on. So these two right here, if you look at the width, this is the one that there should be 3.
Yeah, there should be
but
3 in there.
There should be 3, but the road is going over a large portion of 201.
and you know, that's right, that's what Steve said, and that's what's very perplexing because of these two drawings, which is kind of the
Because you're-
opposite of what you were
I don't
thinking.
know what it is we're being asked to
Well, I would say that,
recommend at this point.
what I would do is I would recommend that you change the, this wasn't a public hearing, it wasn't notified, it wasn't, it's a discussion item. I would say that then I would go ahead and alter your recommendation, city council, and say the acquisition of land adjacent to, the existing land owned by the city, and give the parcel, it looks like these two have the same parcel number even, do you see?
I don't know, you see, I
Yeah.
even have a problem
Two-
with that language, no effect.
Yeah.
No, that's, no offense taken.
203 and 205 look like one
There-
parcel
They do.
number.
If the city owns
One lot.
some piece of land
Oh,
that's immediately
Commissioner
adjacent to the
Quillisi, do you have your mic on? Commissioner Quillisi?
Turn your mic on.
on.
Sorry.
Sorry. If the city owns land immediately adjacent to, and as we've seen, partially overlapping into Signal Street, and the one that that's 201, and we're being asked to deal with 205, then the question is, who owns 203?
Us,
And does it,
no. Us.
see, that's what I don't
Yeah,
understand.
okay, I think I understand now. What Kathleen's saying is that 201 is all but obscured.
Well, yeah, 201
Okay,
run, the
and we-
assessor
and-
parcel
and
runs
we
out
own-
into the street, yes.
Okay, and we own 203. The gentleman that bought the two foreclosed lots bought 205 and 206.
207.
207, I apologize. He sold 207, that's the one that somebody wants to put a house on. He came back and said, I'll sell you 205.
And that's
So
my
the staff report
understanding.
is actually accurate. I think the problem is that what's confusing is that 201 is actually almost 100% obscured by the road.
Got it.
The actual
So
pavement.
we would actually be, and going back to this picture, we would actually be gaining this land right here.
Okay, we're talking about the lot that has
Right
the
in the
trees
middle.
on it.
Yes.
So we
Okay.
would have green space here that would really be a nice addition to that corner to make.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
All right. And that's my understanding as well.
Is it? Okay.
That was my understanding as well, that the issue came from the difference between the paper street and the physical asphalt out on site.
Sure.
The labeling of the
Thanks,
parcels also seems a little off.
I'm sorry, the what?
the parcel numbers seem off
Yeah,
as
they go
discrete.
Maybe that's
as
only for
dis-
tax purposes.
Well, but,
Well, yeah, we just went
but
through
we
that.
have to,
It's assessor parcel.
right, exactly.
So I will explain that to you.
It may be because the city owns them that it's like that they're,
So-
so.
So if you look at if you're looking at the tax assessor's map, and where it says, where you see the handwritten, Sherry writes the address in, so that's Sherry's writing on top of the addresses. But where you see the little 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, the little teeny tiny ones, those are lot numbers. The ones that are ones with a circle around them, those are tax assessors' tax numbers. If the same person owned 2 and 3, then they could get one tax bill.
Got it. Okay.
The little two and three.
No, the one that has the circle around it. So where she was saying,
Those are-
it's just, I don't know what date this map has on it, but that's the deal. So you can see where some people,
The circled numbers do not denote different tax bills?
they do. So you can see where 209 and 211 look like they get one tax bill, they get 04.
Yeah, right.
That's probably, if you look at the aerial, that's that big,
Off the map.
it's like, it's like a duplexy or multifamily, they would get one tax bill. So that's why you sometimes have to be very careful about equating them on a 1-to-1 ratio.
So I think we'll just make a set of assumptions here that, and proceed on that basis. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Nolan, did you want to make a presentation on
Yeah,
this?
I'll
Okay.
just make a little complete streets presentation. So,
Are we going to forward a recommendation to the city council or not?
No, everybody?
okay, we'll wait. I can wait.
Commissioner Nolan was going to share a little bit more about the project, and then I was going to definitely see if there were comments from the audience.
Okay, so I've chaired the Complete Street Subcommittee since, I think it was January of 2011. And even prior to that, I know Grand Avenue was a project for the Complete Streets. And in that process, we've gone out and measured streets, clocked traffic and what have you. And at that time, we were aware that a sliver on the west side and then a parcel on the east side of that intersection did belong to the city. And those 2 vacant lots were there. And first, we all assumed that maybe the city had owned them. But we made note of it. But last year, we actually had one of our active Complete Streets members from the public bring to our attention that it was for sale, and several of us had also seen the for sale signs. She ended up talking to the owner and brought back more information. So as a group, as a Complete Streets group, we looked at it, and we ended up writing a letter to the city council. And it was a letter of consideration. And so I just wanted to share some of the topics that we looked at and why we thought the city should consider it. And at the same time, we did also mention, we realize it's going to cost money. There's going to be, depending on what goes on there, possibly maintenance. And that, of course, that was a consideration too. But let me just see. I don't want to read the whole thing. I'm just going to kind of go through it. Okay. So basically, we've also looked at that intersection because the road is not in alignment there. And we collected data, and I believe, I'm just kind of generalizing right now, I don't have the data in front of me, but almost a good portion of the people that go through that intersection end up going over the lines because of the misalignment. And it's a school route, and it's a route that we are looking at in our master/implementation plan. And so what we identified was that if, in fact, the city, could buy that property, it would give us the city the ability to have some options on aligning that intersection there. But the other thing I wanted to point out too is that everything that we're doing in the master implementation plan, is a network of alternate transportation. So whether it's bike or pedestrian. So we're actually, just not doing a route to nowhere, but a route to get somewhere. So routes to the schools, links to the public parks, you know, how to filter the neighborhoods into downtown. So not every neighborhood's going to have need a sidewalk or a bike route, but that's kind of our general approach. And so we looked at that intersection as being kind of a key complete streets node in that Grand, of course, intersects there, and you've got the Topo Topo School, and a lot of people use that route to get into town, into the junior high area specifically. So it made it an important location. But some of the points or observations that we made were, adjacent to that lot are several multifamily housing units. There also are several senior assisted living facilities. The area to the southwest and east of the lot is densely populated, and we felt that additional space there could accommodate a complete streets application and pedestrian paths. So it's just some of the opportunities that we saw where it could be a public pocket park to serve the multifamily housing units and the dense housing area. It would preserve open space. It could also be a link and a node to the hiking trails that have been developed by the Land Conservancy up at the top of Signal. So there's a lot more, not only people driving, but walking and using the trails and using Signal Street. So it could be a node where you may have an informational kiosk as to trails and pedestrian access in that area. It also would be a link or node on our proposed crosstown bike route. Once again, I had mentioned about the connection of green spaces and parks. And it could be a public park with the design through our neighborhood planning process. There's an opportunity there. And we just threw out a couple ideas, and these were just ideas that we came up with, and of course there are members of the public in our group. But it could be a community garden, for example. It could be a children's nature garden or a natural garden. And the reason I point that out is it gets back to the whole topic of water and maintenance. Who knows, it could just look just the same way it does now with mulch and a picnic table. And it could provide a really nice space where you're not adding extra water and a lot of maintenance. But the other thing is it could have a senior exercise station because of all, you know, the adjacent senior facilities, picnic area, and then, as I mentioned earlier, like a kiosk. So those were just some of the ideas, and I just wanted to share what we had included in the letter. And this was September last year, 2015.
Quick question. I remember seeing a public works project on paper for this area.
Yes, as a matter of fact, Greg Grant does have a grant to address that area. I think it's still in the formulating, I think the money's been awarded, but kind of the formulation process. So anything, when he's ready to get it going, it would go out for like public workshop, public input. And we did actually come up with some sample designs, and they actually were presented here at the city. So that may have been where you saw them. But yes, so that intersection has been kind of a hot topic. I can remember before I was even on Planning Commission, people coming to Commission and to City Council talking about that dangerous intersection.
As I recall, that was how Mr. Fisher came in, and they moved his access, his driveway, around over to Signal Road to relieve that, and that was part of Greg Grant's proposal, and that, you know, they would get rid of that. But I'd also like to see, is there, there's a lot of talk about traffic flow as you turn, you go up Signal and it turns into Grand, but yet you got to make that turn to Signal where most of the hikers are going now. That's kind of a funny turn right there. There should be, you know, along with parks and things like that, which are all good. I don't think we can lose on that, but if there's any traffic modifications, we certainly would need an engineer, the city Public Works Department, to make a recommendation on how they would use this site for that purpose.
Right, and so, and I think going back to what Chair Zabilla was referring to, when Greg Grant came and presented that project, he actually presented, I believe there was 3 possible options, and we actually came up with more since then, and nothing's been decided on yet. But there was public input, and basically it's about traffic calming, how to make that intersection more safe.
Right. So I would think,
And so
my
that's-
my personal opinion is that almost takes priority because of the nature of where that is, over a park, even though I'd love parks, and I would love to see a park, but there is a major traffic congestion and issue there.
Right.
And so I wouldn't want to recommend a park when, when the Public Works would have this brilliant idea that would redo the access and the roads and utilize that property for that purpose.
Right. And that was the top priority with Complete Streets, but we looked at that there was enough property, even with some of the possible improvements to make it safer, to have what we called a pocket park, like a small
Right.
neighborhood park. So I'm not talking about soccer fields
Find
and,
water for a pocket park, too.
Yeah.
pardon?
So you got to find water for a
Well, as I mentioned
pocket park,
earlier,
too. Yeah.
we just offered some ideas, but at the same time, it could be a natural park where you're not having to bring in water, and there's existing trees that are surviving on rainwater, and it could be mulched with picnic tables and a kiosk, and it could be a cool neighborhood park. I mean, there's many ways to do it, and it could be done without additional water, so.
And just to clarify, we are just making a recommendation, if any, that the acquisition is consistent with the general plan. Right. So we're not actually
Okay.
making a recommendation about any one particular design. But just one last question on that Public Works project. Was that predicated on being able to buy these lots? Do you know? I won't hold you to it, but just curious.
No.
It wasn't? Okay.
No.
Okay. If nobody else has a question, I'm going to open the public hearing, or whatever this is, discussion item. It's under public hearing, but open the public hearing and invite Mr. Miley to come up.
Thank you. Bill Miley. I live at 919 North Signal Street. I sent you what I'm saying tonight is just a repeat of the email I sent the Planning Commission, and you probably all have. But I wanted it to be public, and I would like this body to say yes to the City Council. I like the idea of my city government, seriously considering the purchase of the 205 grand parcel and adding it to the two lots they already have. And I understand, I went to the Safe Streets presentation that was done 6 or 9 months ago for 3 or 4 days, and talked with Greg Grant about that section. And I've been watching occasionally, the City Council will have a comment that they're in legal discussions about the purchase of property on the west side. The one you talked about, Kathleen, to add to that. My family's lived on North Signal Street since 1979. I have driven that Signal Grand dogleg for 37 years. And I personally have yet to see an accident. I've never run into anybody, but I'm sure there have been accidents there. I remember one time when somebody coming west on Grand Avenue didn't quite make it and ran into the 20-inch water pipe there, put a big dent in it. But it didn't hit it, didn't hurt any houses or other cars. So I was aware when the sign came up for the sale of the property, and it disappeared for a few times. I think people were taking it down because they didn't want anybody to buy it. And I do understand, I think the first lot sold for $250,000 or something like that. I've seen them scrape it and move the rocks, and now I guess they're building a house. I looked at the administrative report that Director Wall wrote for this project, and I picked out several terms and portions of the pages to emphasize for the public hearing. So I believe the planned purchase conforms to factors in the general plan and there are 10 of them. So like Kathleen talked about, the items that were important, both Kathleen's. So number one, it would preserve the existing natural protected live oak trees. 2, it maintains natural landforms. 3, it would likely increase pedestrian and bicycle safety. 4, it would extend space for openness. 5, it would add to current owned open city land. 6, it could create more parkland, recreation areas. And one that comes to mind is the White Oak Circle Park that's been there for 50 years. It's a great park. 7, it would add to the beautification of our city. Instead of a built environment, we have a natural environment, because I'm sure that anybody who bought that 205 lot and wanted to build on it would have justification for removing a bunch of those oak trees, because they couldn't be used without removing them. 7, it would add, I said beautification of the city. 8, it would, or could, add a respite spot for walkers, bicyclists, car travelers. Like someone might say, hey, let's stop at the Signal Grand Mini Park for a break. And about 3 months ago, when it was still cold, there's a young woman who lives in one of the duplexes just to the east. And she comes out and sits on a rock and reads a book in the sun. I thought, well, that's really nice. And somewhere on this, somebody or sometime, there's a little bench that looks like it came from the Roman times 2,000 years ago. It sits out there just off of Summer, which is kind of interesting. 9, it would add a park-like setting on the north middle west section of our city, which we don't have. And 10, it adds property to the Public Works Department goal and options for transportation, circulation, safety designs at this very busy corner. At least it's busy most of the time. And I remember years ago, maybe 20 years ago, it received a transportation rating of F. It's the only one in the city at the time that got an F, which was failure or faulted or whatever that means, okay? So, I support the Planning Commission's, I would like to ask your Planning Commission, which I think you're going to do anyway, to recommend to the city that they buy it, City Council. And I look forward to that happening. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Miley. Again, just to clarify, we are not recommending for the city to buy or not buy this parcel. We are just making a recommendation as to whether or not this, an acquisition would be consistent with the general plan.
I agree. I think it does conform. Thanks.
Okay. So unless anybody else has something they'd like to share, I would entertain a motion or a something.
I do have a comment to make.
Oh,
I just
I'm
think
so sorry.
regardless of the parcel distributions, the city should make every effort to purchase as much property as possible on that corner. I mean, there's a little uncertainty about what's what there, but anytime we have the opportunity to buy any of that land, I think we should do it. So, but I guess that's not what we're actually voting on. We're just saying, is it consistent with the general plan? So.
But you do have a microphone. You have the bully pulpit. Anybody else like to share any thoughts on this matter? Any further thoughts?
I'd like to make a motion that we forward a recommendation to City Council stating that acquisition of 205 Grand Avenue is consistent with the general plan.
I'll second that.
Roll call, please.
Quillisi?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jagiello?
Yes.
Isabella?
Yes.
Nolan?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. Okay, we are going to now move on to our informational items, and let's chat about director decisions.
Thank you. So we have just, as you know, we've now doing this once a month, and this is what we have to date is a few home occupations, again, a lot of tree permits, work either in the drip line of an oak, or in some cases, removal of dead trees. We had one pruning of a coast live oak. I think we're getting a lot more compliant with our work for trees, under trees, pruning trees, removing trees. I think community's been really compliant of late. Just a couple of director's exemptions. They're really pretty minor. Re-roof, change paint color, add the skylights. So again, our director's decisions are relatively minor. And I can answer any questions you might have. Or just move on to the active code enforcement list, which again, we've sort of divided up into, as you do know, City Council has given us priority to work on short-term rental, code compliance activities, and we do work on health and safety issues. So the building official has been tasked with looking at all code compliance cases that come in and making sure that they are don't involve anything that's really life-threatening and building and safety issues. Those would rise to the top two along with the short-term rentals. And so we would just say that as to date now, we have done some citations on the short-term rentals. And then finally, we have our upcoming meetings, our Planning Commission upcoming meetings. And so August 17th, we have 306 Blanche. We have Cottages Among the Flowers coming back again. 410 West Ojai, the Movement Studio, and the CUP isn't going August 17th. The applicant there isn't available, so we moved it to the September 7th. We will point out that you do have coming up another joint meeting with City Council. We'd like you to think about the topics you'd like to talk. We always sort of rush that, so we'd like you to give it some thought way ahead of time. And with that, we just continue to kind of roll the projects that we're working on. Then staff has had some new inquiries of additional projects coming in. I feel kind of awkward saying that as we just start talking about water, but we've had some significant inquiries and some large projects. So with that, I guess I'm open to anything else you want to add on to the agenda, but right now it looks like we're pretty full for August 17th.
Okay. Did you want to say something?
We do have some new planning commissioners coming in, don't we?
Yes.
They have not been
haven't been
certified or
ratified.
Thank
The
you.
reason I'm asking is because one of the items
I
on
know.
August
Yeah.
17th.
We know.
We're assuming they will be, but if they're not, then we'll have to move that. But
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
It's scheduled for August 9th City
Yeah.
Council meeting.
Right.
But again, it's presumptuous of staff to assume council's going to do
No,
anything. It's
no.
up to them. We just have tentatively scheduled it to be courteous to this applicant that's been waiting a really long time. If they don't ratify those people, we'll just deal with that when that happens.
That's an if we have a quorum item.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's move on to our Planning Commission committee reports. I don't think that we have anything until we get to complete streets. Is that right? Okay.
So we had our meeting today, our monthly meeting. I always like to announce it. We're open to the public. We meet the first Wednesday of the month here at City Hall from 2:30 to 5. And on our agenda today, well, I should just step back. The one thing that we've mainly been working on is our draft, the name has not been decided yet, but it's implementation or master implementation plan. And we're getting the draft ready. The next step will be to go to City Council so that we can have City Council review it to make sure that we're on track. Right now, one of our planners is actually working with Greg Grant to make sure that everything is in compliance with our general plan and circulation element. So that's in process. we're really excited about it. We've worked really hard on this. In addition to our regular meetings, we've had special meetings where we've worked on doing editing. So basically, just to fill everyone in, the city had hired Nelson Nygaard, a consulting firm, to start the process. So they had public workshops that we had last May at the Women's Club. They collected data, and they put together the first round of the document. And then it needed additional editing and information, and we had finished up our funds that we had allotted for that grant. So basically, the committee has been doing that and working on that since, well, got it probably about a good 9 months. So we're getting close. And that was probably one of our main topics today, was just going over that and the process. We also had a project, well, we had some members of the public come to Complete Streets with a project that I actually mentioned and brought to Planning Commission last month. And we're going to be advising them to go directly to City Council to just do a presentation. I also did get a volunteer, and I may not have mentioned this before, but VCTC, which is the Ventura County Transportation Commission, actually has a citizen representative from the different cities in the county. So it's an optional volunteer position. But Susan Leach is now the representative for the city of Ojai, and she has changed her schedule to now be an active member on the Complete Street, which is great because she's dealing with funding and a lot of other things that the county's offering. So in addition to that, she has offered to help me get the information for the website, which I will be contacting Kathleen and apparently Amber with. I met with you, remember, about 4 to 6 weeks ago about having a web page on the city website under Complete Streets, right? So I've been super busy, but
It's already there.
well, it's there, but we need to have some information loaded and how that's going to.
That's really
Be
easy.
done.
That's really easy to do. You just need to, it just goes into a folder.
Okay.
And it's, everything that you're putting on there is static, so it just gets reviewed, put in a
Okay.
folder, and then uploaded to the web.
Okay, good.
So if you send us something that you want, then we just review it. I mean,
Make sure it's, approve it.
more or
Which
less.
is fine.
right?
No, I'm in total agreement.
Yeah.
I mean, so basically what we want to have on there is educational material, informational information, for instance, like grants that have been awarded, projects that are active, could even, have the funding amount, the budget, what have you. The policy could actually be there, just easy links for people to get information.
All that's doable.
Right, so that's our intention. So anyway, Susan Leach has offered to help me do that. And I always apologize because I don't have any time to go home and write up my minutes because I just came from the meeting, so I'm kind of going through this. Let's see. We also did discuss some of the safety islands that are going to be going on the bike trail. We might have brought this up before, but intersections where the bike trail goes to, let's say, Montgomery Street is rather dangerous, the one on Country Club, and the other one was on Bryant. So we're going to be doing some applications there to actually slow down traffic and make it safer. And that also ties in with the bike park that is apparently going through, or at least being looked at Libby Park. And let's see, I just want to go through this. All right, and then another thing that we're going to be doing is data collecting. So for instance, we have some concept projects in the master implementation plan, and we also have grants that have been funded, but we don't always have data for those projects. And so what we're going to be doing is collecting vehicle counts during the summer and then once school has started. Because part of the goal or one of the main goals of Complete Streets, and this is not just here in Ojai, but nationwide, is to actually cut down on vehicles on the road and to offer alternate transportation. So now you're cutting down traffic, you're making the roads safer, you're reducing carbon emissions and what have you. And so we're going to be doing those traffic counts on Grand and through our crosstown route. Probably starting pretty soon. Greg Grant's going to be doing that. And then one thing that I neglected to bring up today because it was last minute was Ojai Day is October 15th. Last year, the Complete Streets had a booth, and it was very successful. We had a lot of really good feedback. We had forms for people to fill out, and we had an interactive map. And so we have, Amber contacted me and asked if we wanted to be active again. So I'll have to email everyone out and let the group know. And there's one thing I wanted to bring up to Planning Commission. There is now a bicycle coalition that is formed here in the Valley. And I've actually attended 2 of the meetings because there's, some overlap. And the county actually has a representative from Steve Bennett's office there at the meetings. And so I wanted to ask the commission if they felt it was appropriate for me to attend those meetings as the chair of the Complete Streets and kind of represent the city in that capacity. If you didn't feel it was a conflict and if it was okay. So. Okay. All right. Good. Just want to make sure. So does anyone have any questions?
Is the master plan going to come before Planning Commission?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
it will. Most definitely.
Any idea when?
Right. So I had brought that up last month, and it was like what direction to go to. So we will first be going to City Council because we want to just make sure we're going in the right direction. And then I'm guessing that after City Council looks at it, would probably come back to Planning Commission. But this all takes some time, and we may have a consultant come to do it. So I can't give you a date, unfortunately. But it's definitely in process, and we're getting close, so that's good.
Public Works has asked the planning staff to assist them with that, and right now staff is working on doing like a matrix. There's some analysis that needs to be done because there's already, a Complete Streets plan, so there's an issue with what's, consistency with the general plan, what's been proposed, is that consistent, and how does it differ? So in really, in short terms, it really is doing like we've done of late, putting together a term sheet for council to look at and say, without all the detail behind the concepts, yes, we agree or we don't agree with the general term sheet you have and where you're going and why you're changing things that you're changing, or why are you even proposing those things, So that's kind of the issue. And I think it does get kind of in a roundabout circular issue because the Complete Street is a subcommittee of yours. And so the idea was, should they come back to you so that you can say, yes, that's how I want you to represent me, or do they go to council first and then come back to you? So that I think the idea was for them to go to council first. And so again, you may have an issue with, how are they representing the Planning Commission because they are your subcommittee. And that's just, I guess, an issue that will have to be approached if that's, when it happens or if it happens.
Yeah, that's the part that's just a little confusing to me.
Right. Well, for instance, last month at our meeting, I actually came forward with the intention of first coming to Planning Commission and asking, and then I was advised to go do the City Council. So, following.
Right, but they are going to represent. It's the same issues as the issue with the second residential units, and one commissioner representing the entire commission. When you're representing the commission, it needs to be vetted through the commission. So, however that will work, I'm not really sure. But at this point, we're trying to put it together because I don't think there's still, from what I understand, really consensus with the group in and of itself. Whether they want this to be a master plan or an implementation, because all those changes, that really changes the kind of review it needs, what kind of environmental document it needs. And so, I think there's still some fleshing out of where they're going with it. Is that right, Kathleen? That's my understanding?
Right. And I also wanted to point out that Commissioner Quillisi is also a member of Complete Streets.
I did have a comment. The City Council appropriated funds last year for a consultant to work on this Complete Streets project. They did some workshops, some public outreach, and drafted a report that was dated last August. I got more deeply involved in this around January, and the Complete Streets Subcommittee has, with voluminous additional public input, been through a number of revisions of the consultant's report. We're now up to revision 6, and 7 is coming soon. And the thought was that before we get a lot of staff time involved in all of this, right now it mostly involves Greg Grant coming to the Complete Streets meetings, that we needed to go back to City Council and say, you gave us money for this sort of a purpose. Is this what you had in mind, and is this consistent with the policies that you would want to have the Planning Commission, expend more effort to flesh out or create additional detail or whatever? And that's why we're going first to the City Council.
And I will just add on to this is that I think one of the reasons, another issue that's really difficult is that the Complete Street is used for two dual purposes. One is to help Greg Grant get his grants and do implementation on projects. So that part of it is kind of under the Public Works umbrella. The actual planning part, which is this document we're talking about, is actually under your planning. That's the way that I've been told. Because that's one of the reasons I think that just fuels this confusion is there's lots of things that they're doing when they're talking about projects have nothing to do with the Planning Commission. And so you've got a subcommittee of the Planning Commission doing something that's really not part of your mission. So I think that's where it gets really confusing.
So, obviously, I just think the main thing is just to be very clear when that happens, that the subcommittee doesn't represent the commission as a whole, because it hasn't been vetted through us. As long as those boundaries are very clear, obviously, I can see a lot of sense in
Yeah,
doing it that way.
the subcommittee actually is not taking the document to City Council. Greg Grant through the Public Works Department is.
I see.
Well, then
Or at least that's
that will
what-
have to just be imparted to him, that's the issue. And like I said, we've been struggling with this now for months, if not longer, over responsibilities with the Complete Streets, because it has grown into a much more complex subcommittee of the Planning Commission.
And it's just hard to, I think for me, and I don't know if the rest of my fellow commissioners who aren't on this committee feel this way, but it's like getting it in piecemeal is no substitute for seeing the big picture, and I don't feel like I have the big picture at all. I don't really, I hear what you're saying in each meeting, but I don't get how all these pieces fit together.
Well, I'd be happy to meet with you. And I would say probably one of the best things to do, if you haven't had a chance to do it, is to read the Complete Streets policy, which we actually helped, along with our planning staff several years ago, write that policy. And it was a state mandate in 2010 that every community have a Complete Streets policy. And the one that we're working on right now is a follow-up document that supports the policy, but it takes it to the next step so you can actually move forward and get projects and funding going. Right. So
Yeah, I
think-
understand the policy. It's just, how is it now coming to life?
Okay.
Do you guys have a sustainability committee report? No?
No, not tonight.
Okay.
But hopefully, we're going to be meeting soon now that Commissioner Jagiel is back, and we will I could contact Kathleen if there's something, I guess, that we need to, or just come on the commissioner report and do it there. Okay.
And welcome back, Commissioner Jagiello. Okay. If there's nothing else, then we'd like to invite Councilmember Clapp up.
Well, just briefly, you all might well know that I withdrew my papers for running for mayor, and I thrown my support behind Johnny Johnson Sr. 1,000%. I think he would be a great addition to the city council with his breadth of knowledge and his love for the community. And that's about all I have to report, other than, of course, we've got problems with water, and the new restrictions for the people in the community are down to watering once a week for 10 minutes. And there's a huge outcry from the community about this, because I think we're all seeing our old growth trees dying because Of course, we've overdrafted the groundwater so much that the tap roots of trees can't reach any water there, and now we're being required to starve them from above. So that's a pretty painful thing to see. And that's about all I have to report. And does anyone have any questions of me?
I appreciated you mentioning that we might have a moratorium on building. Is that-
I am going to bring forward this coming Tuesday at the next council meeting. I'm going to ask my colleagues if they would support the idea of implementing a moratorium at this point. And it will be up to them to whether or not they agree that it's something that we need to do, or whether we continue as we are at this point.
It's come up several times here. People keep saying, how can you approve anything right now?
I have the same
It'd be really nice
question.
to get that direction from the council.
I have the same question, and just editorially, again, I'm not speaking for all of council. I find it, I don't understand how we can approve new projects when people are being restricted the way they are.
Exactly.
And of course, we have no control over the weather at this point.
I would ask the city council if it's possible to bring in some experts, because I think what's happening in the community is there's just not enough knowledge and awareness of how bad or what the situation is. Now, there's these, I've heard there's some water, who's the group that meets? What was that?
Save Ojai Water.
OBGMA?
No, he's
OBGMA?
you're talking about the community
Basin
initiative.
Groundwater.
The community initiative.
Save Ojai Water
Save
through
Ojai
Green
Water.
Coalition.
Yes, I'm aware of them.
Okay, well, for instance, I'd like to have that, I'd really like to have that dialogue, and not just with the city council, but bringing in the experts so we can really, everyone hear and engage in the dialogue. Is that possible?
I think it'd be a good idea to maybe have a workshop for the community, because this is something that is not just a question that you guys have as decision makers as well as council, but the rest of the community needs to understand. Unfortunately, water's really complex. I served on the OBGMA for almost 8 years. And the basin here in Ojai recovers very quickly and gets depleted very quickly. And historically, that's how it's gone. But we all know that right now, history is not repeating itself. And the lake is at 38%, and water's not falling out of the sky. And also, yes, I'm aware of the people investigating the possibility of going up into the mountains and drilling into the side of the mountain and finding another water source. Of course, that would be something that would require tremendous amounts of money, and you hope that you find the water, and how do you get it here, and how expensive would it be? And is that really a sustainable way to manage your water? Is that robbing Peter to pay Paul? And instead, do we as a community need to address the water issue and live within our means, or are we going to go outside of our community to bring in water to sustain a population that really is stressing the environment as it exists right now and irreparably damaging our urban forest? Again, it's editorial. It's very important to me, and that's why I'm speaking about it.
That's why I thought bringing the experts would take a little bit of pressure also off of you, because it has to kind of get out of the personal opinion range, like everybody has their personal opinion. I'd rather hear a community workshop process where the buy-in is understood by the community. It's not just a decision that you're making because it's your opinion.
Or in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Right, and water, again, I'm going to repeat, that after 8 years, I have learned enough to know that it is a very complex discussion to have.
Right.
Water is, in 8 years, I'm still learning about it, and it's not an easy answer. And really, the authorities are our local representative, Russ Baggerly. He's a tremendous authority on water, and Jordan Kerr, the contract hydrologist for OBGMA, is an authority. I had him come in once before and give a presentation to council, but you did not have you I don't believe
Right.
had the pleasure of having that, or the lack of pleasure of having that report. Those are the two people that I would say would be really, really valuable to bring into a workshop to help people understand the complexities of water and help. You're right. Help educate you and the community and everybody concerned.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of even hiring an expert to give us a report on what to do, as a community, like a moratorium, and make that recommendation from an outside party.
Whether or not they would recommend it?
Well, or at least have that, well, to be able to define the issues, to define the the volume of water available, how it consistently will affect our community as long as it doesn't rain, we have a consistent drop in our water supply. I really would love personally to see a graph, that just tells us the story.
Well, if I may interject, with all due respect, I don't want to bring in a consultant and spend $20,000 on a consultant. We have the authorities available to us through the OBGMA. We are a member of the OBGMA, and we have a very, very competent hydrologist on staff there.
Cool.
He is totally capable of giving that information, and it will not be
And it's
a
free.
great expense for us.
Yeah, right.
And also, as I mentioned, Russ Baggerly is the representative on Casitas. And the other thing that really is one of the confusions that people have with water is that we have no control over whether we can do meters or not. That's all Golden State Water's decision. Casitas has no control over that either. So that they're a different agency. We have Casitas Water, and then you have Golden State that is a customer of Casitas.
Yeah, a bunch of little ones.
Golden State controls whether will serve letters, which are the right to have a meter attached to the water supply, are issued. That's Golden State's choice. Casitas has nothing to do with that. And those are some of the things that I think could be clarified if we had Russ come. And then and Russ also is on the OBGMA board. And he, at this point, I respect his knowledge and his love of the valley, and I respect Jordan's incredible expertise as a hydrologist. So what I could do, and to back up, and the only authority we have as a city council, I believe, is city council can put a moratorium, but that's the only control we can have. And so what I could do is go to council, and I'd be more than happy to do this, and suggest that we have a citywide forum / workshop on water, and extend the invitation to Russ Baggerly and to Jordan Kerr, and see if we can get everybody, kind of more educated about what we're up to.
Exactly, and I think that process would be appropriate to happen before you made a moratorium on it, so that way.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I can't make a moratorium.
Yeah, right.
That would be a decision of city council.
Right,
And-
before even the city council.
Right, of course, certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly, that's a really great idea, because it is, that's a big step
Well,
in the
and it's
community.
big for us because it constantly comes up for us. And we feel kind of like almost a criminal by approving some of these projects and going, oh, wow, we're really approving this, aren't we? And how bad is this water situation? We really need to know. So we're going to be having a joint meeting with the city council here, next week? And I think that's one of the primary subjects.
I agree.
think, myself.
I agree.
Next month.
And the thing about the water situation is bad.
Next week.
That's September 17th.
Yeah, next month.
Oh.
Next meeting, we talk about topics.
Ooh.
The thing about water, just
Confusion
kind
with
of,
August 17th.
Yeah.
water's a problem until it isn't again. And there's no predicting when that's going to be. That's the problem. I don't think anybody can say, oh, we're okay, because it's like a crystal ball. No one can predict. Because they said that we were going to have El Nino, right? It's going to really hit us. And now I just read there was a 100-year storm in Phoenix today, 2 inches in 1 hour. So it's like we're in this little vortex right now of no water, and we can't. There's just no way we can predict it. So all they can say, and all Jordan most likely will do, and I'm just speculating, is he'll just show historical data. Historically, this is what happens. It goes up and down, up and down, up and down. No rain, the light goes down. Rain, the light goes up. Same with water tail, up, down, and historically that's the way it's been. 7, 8 year cycles, and that's how it works. So is that going to continue? Your guess is as good as mine. So I will bring it up. I think it would be really important to do. I promise you I'll do that.
I've heard Jordan's presentation a couple of times, once I think to council and
Yeah,
maybe once here, I'm not sure. And it was very informative. Some of his charts are sufficiently complex that they're only discernible by another hydrologist.
Well,
And so we need, it's going to take a little extra work, but if he's going to address the general public not in an alarmist way necessarily, though that they
he's
may
not
well be
alarmist.
appropriate.
Yeah.
We need something a little bit simpler for the general public.
You know, I think you're right. He's kind of a wonk, you know?
Well,
He's like a scientific.
You'd have to be.
He's just an incredible
Yeah,
guy.
right.
And you're absolutely right. It's such a complex thing, and then he's such a scientist. So I will when I work to get this brought forward, I will make that recommendation that he make it a little more simple for the layperson, as simple as you can make water, which I've learned is
Okay.
really complex.
Shifting gears a bit here, you said you decided not to run for mayor. Are you going to run to retain your council seat?
I haven't made that decision yet. I haven't
Okay.
done it yet.
Just curious, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's the 12th that that's the final day to submit
That's
your
right,
papers.
because there are incumbents. Right. If there
Correct.
were no incumbents, it would be the 17th
Correct.
to file. We found that with the sanitary district.
That's correct. You're right. You're right. So,
Just one,
I haven't filed yet.
Okay.
one last word on the water situation. I always say realtors are the canaries in the coal mine, and we are starting to see people who are either leaving or not wanting to be here for that very reason.
You mean in
And-
real estate, you're noticing that?
Yes.
What, people are selling because there's no water?
Well, they're scared.
Scared.
And there's no place for them to take their concerns and get active and get involved. They just, this is what happens when people just get afraid and they don't necessarily know how dire it is, or what it is that we're going to do. People need to feel like they can do something, that somebody's doing something, that it's on everybody's radar. When the community starts to pull together and that's obvious, then people feel reassured. But right now, it's all happening very quietly, and perception creates reality.
Yes, it does, and I think the reason it's happening quietly, or appears to be happening quietly, is because people, and I'm no exception until I got involved in government, knowing the different bodies and your ability to participate with each body. And so I will also approach Casitas with Russ. So Russ will be my conduit to Lake Casitas and to OBGMA, and OBGMA will be Jordan Kerr. And so maybe Steve Wickstrom, the general manager of Casitas, could come as well. But I think a lot of people don't know they have meetings, and you can go and ask them questions. OBGMA has meetings that are noticed, and you can go to them as well. So maybe what we need to do, Kathleen, I'll forget, maybe what we need to do is put on the website those meetings for people, or a link to their meetings, so that if you are concerned about water, you may want to attend these meetings, click here, and then that way we can send them to those agencies, because we don't control water. And I think that's something that is very confusing to everyone, because it doesn't make sense, does it, that we don't control the water, that it's these other agencies. So maybe that would be a good idea to do that, and then people can start knowing where to go to address their concerns to the appropriate body that has something to do with it. And I think there's also, and Russ might be able to explain this, I think there's also just protocols. And Kathleen, do you know this? Are there protocols within water and droughts and stage 1, 2, and 3 that are like law, or is it discretionary per agency?
I don't, my understanding is that it was, I think it depends on the size of isn't that how it works, the size of the water agency? So across the state, there are rules and regulations, but they differ depending on the size of municipality or the water purveyor. That was my understanding.
And maybe the number of taps.
I heard that guy talk too back last year, and that's the way he kind of made it sound.
Gordon,
was
yeah.
that. So I don't know. I think it's very complex.
It is so complex.
But I think, it should be said that, while you guys are talking about not being able to water trees, we're still doing a lot of pool permits. I don't know how many we've done this year, which is completely, it has nothing to do with water that you're consuming or bathing or, it's a luxury item. And so we're still doing, how many do you think we've done this year? Yeah, so while there are people that are really afraid, there's still people that are not at all, so it's odd to us, because if you're talking about you approving things, we approve the pools all the time, and it seems odd to staff that people are still putting in pools when there's such concern out there.
Well, just editorial again, this is part of our lack of control. And one of the reasons Golden State Water is somebody we want out of our community, because to them, they'll keep issuing hookups, because that's money to them.
And if they keep on,
Sales.
doing will serve letters, yes.
Yeah, it's about money to them, and they're going to make as much money off of us as they possibly can until they're finally out of town. And the litigation could take another 1 or 2 years. So that's why we as a community have to exercise what control we do have. And my understanding, and I'm going to meet with Matt Summers about this, is I want to get clear what rights we do have in the way of moratoriums. How does that work? I know the city of Ojai had them in the past. John, you were around. Were you around for the moratorium before?
No, I haven't seen it.
You were after that, yeah. So we've had moratoriums here before.
And even if Ojai Flow manages to wrap up this litigation quickly, all that will happen is some negotiations and eventually an eminent domain takeover, and it will still be Casitas that controls the will serve letters, not the city.
But the way that operates is differently. Golden State actually doesn't control will serve. This is where it gets complex. They do and they don't. The CPUC controls will serve. They'll tell Golden State you can't serve them anymore. And they haven't told Golden State that. Well, one of the things is the CPUC makes money off of hookups. So it's this whole kind of thing going on. And that's why water is really a very fascinating political topic, because it's very, if you've ever read Cadillac Desert, you'd learn about water and what an incredibly interesting topic it is and how complex it is. So yeah, that's where we're at. And so I think that I will ask about a workshop, and I will see if I can get that process rolling, because I think it's all a real legitimate concern for everyone, because I think we all see how brown everything's getting. It's very scary, and all we need is a fire now, huh?
The Green Coalition had a presentation last month. Commissioners Nolan and Merck and I were there, and it was at the Presbyterian Church, and it was well attended. But I think there's something to be said for a city initiative. I think that's going to pull in more people, and then really starting to look at what can we do? What can we actually do? Because just hearing more information is not enough.
Yes.
You have to do something.
And it's kind of unfortunate when I read a book recently called, I want to call it it wasn't the Dust Bowl, but it was about the people that stayed behind in the Dust Bowl and what they went through. And how they fired explosives into the air, thinking they could make the rain. It was like the rainmaker kind of thing. And I think when you're facing a situation where you're so powerless, like the weather, maybe there's nothing we can do other than making some policy decisions in order to reduce the demand at this point in time. But I suppose we could all go out and do a rain dance and all that, but we are powerless that way, except for policy.
There is some rain collecting technology, is there not, Commissioner Nolan? I mean, there is some stuff that's really cutting edge, but maybe that's what we need to be an example.
Well, gray water, and rainwater catchment.
Right.
If we
I was
ever
just
get rain
going to
again.
make the same comment.
If we ever get the rain again.
I think, because I end up dealing with water in my profession and just, talking with people in general. But I think what I've noticed over the years is there isn't any long-term management plan. So in other words, we know from hydrology that we have, we get we get rain, then we go through a drought period, and then, it goes up and down, and we happen to be in a bad drought period now. Whether you believe in climate change or not, things are changing.
Right.
And typically what happens is when something like, there's an extreme drought, you go into, a moratorium or you make restrictions. And even the state just did this. They did get a lot of snowpack in the Sierras, but they actually cut, they had that 25% reduction, and they stopped that to the municipalities that they're supplying water to. So this is just my thought. And I feel like it's solution-oriented. Do we come up with, maybe there is some short-term moratoriums whether it's building and some other things. But does the city look at possibly doing like a comprehensive long-term plan where you're dealing with water, and maybe things like, gray water become common and it's easier, or it's required on new buildings, things like that. And that kind of ties into our sustainability group that we were going to be looking at. And we did decide that water was, right now, the issue that needed to be dealt with. So I don't want to put restrictions on people. I know people don't want that. They don't want to be over-governed. But at the same time, if you have a resource that like, this is going to happen again.
Sure it is.
I mean, maybe, who knows when we're going to get the rain. We might, or maybe we won't. Like you said, it's a crystal ball. It's so unpredictable. But how do you manage it so that we can stay here?
Well, there's
and
two
survive
things
and
with
thrive.
that. The state of California has mandated that everybody have a water management plan. OBGMA has one. It was a very cutting-edge organization. As a matter of fact, people are turning to them because they were so cutting-edge and ahead of the game. The modification of their water management plan is very minimal because they were so ahead of the game. We have a water management plan. That's why people need to be aware of the OBGMA and their role in our water supply. They saw that we only had rainfall, essentially, available to us, and they knew that they had to manage back in 1952 when it was a huge drought and they were looking at no water, that they had to manage it. As far as the city goes, I don't think it's irresponsible or over-governing. It's actually liberating if you have within your codes certain sustainable requirements, such as solar panels and gray water systems and water catchment systems. That's a liberating force. That's not a restrictive force. And I think that if we really want to sustain our agriculture in this valley, because that's something I think we all cherish, we have to recognize one of the first arguments that's given about water is, oh, well, ag uses it all. It's all their fault. And if you just get rid of the ag, we'll have plenty of water and we can do whatever we want. But ag feeds us. And a lot of these agriculture people are coming up with more and more efficient methods of watering all the time. Computerized systems that can sense whether a plant needs water or not and injects just the right amount. There's ways to sustain agriculture. They're going to help us live. And also, I think it's part of our heart and soul in this valley. So anything we can do on a sustainable level to help sustain them, to me, it's not over-governing. It's working together as a community to make us all have a better life. And sometimes when things get crowded and they get finite, and with overpopulation, it has to stop being about everything that you want as an individual, but what's best for the community. It's a much more global view. And I think that's a kind of a contrarian view in the United States, because we're kind of an individualistic society where, don't tell me what to do. But population pressures, environmental pressures, necessitate that maybe we need to relook at our philosophy and become more global in our view, and realize that if we want to have this valley be a beautiful place and have our oak trees and have our orange trees in the East End, that we maybe need to make some compromises with our own individual desires and wants, and have things like those become part of our requirements for a new building. I think it would be a great thing to do. But that's enough of my bully pulpit. We're tired. Shall we go home?
Yes, let's go home. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Clapp. Anybody else for the good of our order? Okay, we're done.